Yuji Itadori is an ordinary boy in modern-day Japan, brought up by his caring but stubborn and short-tempered grandfather ever since his parents' deaths when he was a baby. He is just starting out high school, and his grandfather is bedridden and battling a terminal illness. In spite of his hardships, he has a perky and optimistic attitude, making him fairly popular in school despite only being a freshman. Nicknamed Tiger of West Middle, he's known for his outstanding athletic abilities, even rumored to have run 100 meters in 5.47 seconds. Despite his clear aptitude for sports, he's a member of the occult club, which holds itself up in a small storeroom to perform rituals to communicate with spirits in the name of club activities. One day, while they're talking to a ghost through a handmade Ouija board, the school president barges in to give them an official notice to disband their club and forfeit their room because they don't conduct any real activities as a research club. The club president, Setsuko Sasaki, boldly presents a mystery file case to disprove his allegations. The rugby field was recently closed off after a bunch of rugby team members fell ill and were even hospitalized. Isn't it strange how so many of the school's most physically fit students suddenly fell sick? Some of the afflicted students reported hearing mysterious sounds from the ground right before they fell ill. The occult club conducted a thorough investigation to discover a newspaper article from 30 years ago that reported the disappearance of Mr. Yoshida, owner of a construction company, who was last seen on the school grounds during its construction. Alas, the grass was green in the new school field, but not in his life. He was struggling to make ends meet and was forced to borrow from loan sharks but was unable to pay off any of them. With many enemies, it was only natural for him to be plucked off by one of them. Thus, the occult club decisively concludes the mystery of the mass illness is caused due to Mr. Yoshida's cursed spirit buried under the rugby field. Though they make a compelling case, the school president points out that the illness was actually caused by a tick breakout. Yuji still tries to convince the president, but he claims that the occult club has many more problems, the biggest being that they don't meet the minimum requirement of 3 members to be legit because Yuji is a track and field club member. He claims to have no idea what the president is talking about to his betrayed seniors when the track and field could. Mr. Gaki appears and states that he's the one who put Yuji's name in the track and field club because he's needed for the school to conquer the nationals. Yuji, who seems to have already rejected the coach many times, demands his name be withdrawn from the club. Mr. Gaki challenges him to a shot put competition, the winner of which will decide this matter. The coach, which is a former national record holder, throws the ball an impressive 14 meters away. Despite having a lean build, Yuji flings the ball hopping 23 meters distance. Seeing this, Setsuko herself says he shouldn't hold himself back in the occult club and join a sports club instead. However, he reassures her and the other senior member, Takeshi Yaguchi, that he wants to be in their club because it's fun and easygoing, and he'd like to be home by 5 p.m. every day for personal reasons. As soon as it is 4:30 p.m., he drops everything and leaves school. On the way, he picks up a flower bouquet to give to his grandfather at the hospital. His granddad yells at him for showing up every day and tells him to work hard in a club. He wants to tell Yuji something about his parents, but Yuji refuses to listen, saying he's uninterested. While arranging the flowers in a vase, his granddad quietly tells him that he has good strength and he should use it to save others so that when he's on his deathbed, he's surrounded by people unlike himself. After that, an unsettling silence settles into the room. Yuji calls out to his granddad, but there's no response. Fighting tears away, he calls the nurses to handle his dead granddad's body. While filling out the paperwork for a death certificate, a black-haired, edgy-looking dude named Megumi Fushiguro approaches him and says he wants to have a word with him. He gets right down to business, telling Yuji to hand over the cursed item he possesses because it's very dangerous, showing a picture of a wooden box with a wrapped object placed inside it. Yuji recognizes it and admits he found it. The edgelord goes on to explain that most unexplained deaths and disappearances are caused by curses, and that curses are formed by mankind's negative emotions, making schools and hospitals hotspots for them. Hence, it's common practice for schools to secretly house a powerful curse object in a protective talisman to ward away weaker curses. However, the powerful curse's seal eventually breaks, luring other curses to swarm around it to fatten themselves up. The box he found contains one such special grade curse, and you should hand it over before people die. He tosses the box at Megumi, but points out that the object inside is with Setsuko and Teiki, who intend on going to school that night to remove the talisman and see what happens. Megumi looks horrified and tells Yuji that they're going to die. He immediately starts running toward the school with Yuji behind him to guide him. Upon arriving, Yuji runs toward the gate, but some invisible force pushes him back. Megumi tells him to stay put and jumps the gate to look for the two. Just from the atmosphere, he can tell the school is overrun with curses already. He comes across the first one very soon, after which he summons 2 of his demon dogs to eat it. Meanwhile, Yuji senses the aura of death inside the school and thinks back to his granddad's death. Even though it was plenty sad and he was left with a feeling of loneliness, his granddad died a proper death, unlike his occult friends if they die inside the school tonight. The thought forces Yuji into action and he busts in through the window, punching the large curse, devouring his friends. He manages to pull Setsuko and Takeshi out, and Megumi finishes off the curse with his dogs. Yuji asks him what they are, to which he replies that they're shikigami, which is also a type of curse. Normally, curses can't be seen unless someone is on the verge of death or in places like this. While picking Setsuko up, something falls out of her pocket. Yuji picks it up and Megumi tells him that's the special grade cursed object, Sukuna's finger, and that it's a miracle it wasn't swallowed yet because it was the curse's main target. Eating it would increase the cursed energy of the lucky curse. Yuji tosses the finger at Megumi, but suddenly a curse leaks through the ceiling above them. Megumi reacts quickly and pushes Yuji away but gets caught by the curse instead. He tries to fight back, but the curse throws him toward a wall, causing the wall to crumble. The curse follows him as he makes a rough landing outside and is barely able to move. Yuji tries to hold the curse off, but Megumi snaps at him, telling him to run away because only a curse can defeat other curses. He eventually gets deadly close to the curse's mouth and swallows the finger on an impulse as a last-ditch effort. Megumi is sure Yuji will die because the finger is supposed to be poisonous, but instead he gets refueled with new superhuman strength and rips the curse's arms apart. The curse hurriedly crawls after him, but he casually smacks it on the head, causing it to disintegrate instantly. After that, 2 extra eyes open on Yuji's cheekbones and an unknown voice starts laughing maniacally from his mouth. He tears off his shirt to remove black marks all over his body. Megumi stares at Yuji, shell-shocked because the worst-case scenario has occurred in reality. The special grade curse has reincarnated and possessed Yuji's body. Megumi sentences Yuji to death in order to exorcise Sukuna's spirit in Yuji's body. Right at that moment, the marks over his body fade and Yuji starts speaking in his normal voice again, claiming he's got everything under control. Megumi gets confused about what he should do when a blindfolded, white-haired dude named Gojo Satoru saunters onto the scene to check on the situation. He asks Megumi if he found the special grade cursed object, to which Yuji says he ate it. He can't believe it at first, but after inspecting him closely through the blindfolds somehow, he concludes it's true. To test his control over it, Gojo tells him to give Sukuna control for 10 seconds, after which he should regain control. Then he turns his back to him and starts casually talking to Megumi about the souvenirs he bought on the way there. Sukuna attacks him from behind but finds himself on all fours and Gojo sitting on top of him, still talking. Sukuna goes for another round, but Gojo blocks all his moves and slowly counts to 10. At 10, Sukuna mutters in disbelief that he really can't take over this body while the marks slowly fade and the extra eyes close. Seeing Yuji back to normal, Gojo taps his forehead, making him unconscious and picks him up. According to Gojo, if he wakes up without Sukuna in control, he has the potential to become something called a vessel. Megumi expresses his desire not to let him die despite Jujutsu sorcerer rules, to which Gojo says he will do his best. Yuji wakes up to find himself in a room covered in every inch with talismans and Gojo sitting on a chair in front of him. Gojo cheerfully recaps the entire situation to him and finally tells him he's been sentenced to death, but not to worry since he's gotten the sentence suspended indefinitely. That still sounds bleak, but okay. He takes out another finger from his pocket and explains that there are a total of 20 such cursed objects for the 4 arms of Sukuna scattered around, of which 6 have been found by Jujutsu sorcerers. They can't destroy them no matter what they try since the curse is so powerful. A very unexpected solution has popped up in front of them in the form of Yuji. For some reason, he can withstand Sukuna's control over him, making him a vessel. When he dies, so will the curse inside him. Hence, Gojo has convinced the tightwad higher-ups to consider this 1 in a million chance and delay his death sentence until after he has absorbed all of Sukuna. TLDR, Yuji can either choose to die this instant or die after he's absorbed all 20 fingers. Maybe he'd like the taste of a curse-human finger because he chooses to live until he's swallowed all of them. He pays a visit to Takeshi, who is in a coma at the hospital. Setsuko, who is already there, starts crying and takes all the blame for what happened to him. Yuji tells her it's not her fault and that someone will come to heal Takeshi soon. After that, he bids farewell to them. Gojo accompanies him when his granddad's body is cremated. While collecting the ashes, he asks if fewer people will die if the world is rid of Sukuna's curse. Gojo replies affirmatively. He thinks of his granddad's last words and makes up his mind. He asks Gojo for the finger and swallows it. The marks reappear on his face as he starts convulsing, causing Gojo to get on high alert. He stumbles around for some time until he starts snickering and says in his normal voice how disgusting it tasted. Relieved, Gojo praises him and tells him to pack his things because he's heading to Tokyo the next day. Megumi, who also enters the room, explains that he's going to transfer to Tokyo Metropolitan Jujutsu Technical High School, one of only 2 jujutsu educational facilities, where they will be first years together. The school is tucked away in the serene outskirts of Tokyo and is officially known as a private religious institution. On his first day there, Gojo takes him to the principal for an interview. While walking there, a mouth emerges on Yuji's cheek and then on his hand when he tries to shut it up. "Michi, is that you?" Sukuna thanks Gojo for basically enabling his growth and promises to kill him first. Gojo considers it an honor to be targeted by him, explaining that Sukuna was a human who existed 1,000 years ago that reigned terror in the world during the Jujutsu Golden Age. With his 4 arms, 2 faces, and unmatchable strength, even the strongest sorcerers couldn't defeat him. After death, he haunts the world through his cursed object. When Yuji asks him if he or Sukuna would win in a fight, he confidently answers he'd win. Yuji and Gojo enter a dimly lit room where a brute-looking man is making stuffed toys. Gojo introduces him as Principal Yaga Masamichi. The principal asks Yuji what he plans to do in Jujutsu Tech. Yuji is stumped at first but says that he wishes to collect all of Sukuna's fingers because of his granddad's dying wish. The principal disapproves of him only doing this because someone else told him to and casts a curse on one of his dolls to attack him. While dodging its surprisingly strong moves, the principal keeps urging him to find his real motive. Eventually, the doll kicks his butt. At that moment, he asks Yuji a crucial question. Will Yuji blame his grandfather when he's killed by a curse? The doll delivers an undercut punch which sends him flying, and during the time he's in the air, he realizes that everything he was good at before, like sports, he knew that someone else could be just as good. He finally fights back and holds the doll in a rear-neck choke, while telling the principal that consuming Sukuna is the one thing only he can do, which is why he wants to do it. Even if he didn't have this death sentence on him, knowing evil was around because he didn't do anything would fill him with regret throughout the rest of his life. The principal seems satisfied with this answer and passes him. Gojo shows him to his dorm room, which is right next to Megumi's, who doesn't share the same excitement as Yuji when he finds out. Gojo explains that Yuji will be accompanying them on their field quests to find the rest of the fingers as a sort of radar, and Sukuna will tell them where they're hiding because he wants to reach his full power. Before all that, the 3 of them have to go to the train station the next day to pick up the other first-year Nobara Fujisaki. Yuji wonders why there are so few students, but there's a simple explanation. Megumi points out that it's very rare for people to be able to see curses, so the most basic criteria to become a Jujutsu sorcerer can't be met by the vast majority of people. They find Nobara harassing a scouting agent to consider her for a modeling gig. She takes one look at the boys and lets out a heavy sigh. She introduces herself and tells them to consider themselves lucky to have a pretty girl in the group. So first impression is she's very confident in herself, to put it nicely. Since they're all country bumpkins, Gojo proposes a Tokyo tour. Yuji and Nobara can't wait to go sightseeing, but their excitement is shattered when their first stop at Roppongi turns out to be a curse exorcism mission. He sends the betrayed duo to exorcise the curse as a field test. Even though Yuji has curse energy flowing through him, it'll take him a while to control it, so Gojo gives him a curse tool called the Slaughter Demon to use. Gojo tells him not to let Sukuna out as a final piece of advice. Nobara treats this mission as a chore that they need to finish as soon as possible. She suggests they split up, with her going down from the top floor while he works his way up. While the 2 are inside, Gojo and Megumi discuss the purpose of this exercise. Gojo reveals that this test is actually for Nobara because Yuji already seems to be completely fine with killing curses, even though they take up disturbing and distorted human forms, but it's still yet to be known if she's crazy enough to look past her fear and disgust to defeat a curse. Megumi wonders if such a test is too late since she's experienced with handling them, but Gojo points out that she's dealt with countryside curses all her life. Since curses grow in proportion to the human population, city curses are on another level compared to the countryside ones. She climbs up the stairs to see a floor full of mannequins but senses something unusual. She calls out to the mannequin in the center that it's not fooling anybody and should reveal itself as the curse it is. When there's no response, she brings out a hammer with a heart on it and 2 nails, which she imbues with cursed energy and launches with her hammer to hit the mannequin in the head. It stumbles back and multiple eyes open, proving it is a curse in disguise. She snaps her fingers to make the nails dig deeper and inject even more cursed energy, making its head pop. She sees a metal rod topple to the floor and notices a kid hiding behind the boxes. She tells him the danger is gone and he can run away now, but he's too scared to do so. She's about to go and call Yuji for help, but a high-intelligence curse appears and holds the kid hostage. For a moment, she considers leaving the kid to save her life, but finally she drops her weapons and asks the curse to let him go. The curse merely chuckles and doesn't give up the boy. Having expected it, Nobara prepares for her death but only regrets that she never got to see someone named Sari again. However, before the curse can do anything, Yuji punches through the wall and chops the curse's hand to force the kid out of its reach. The curse escapes, but Nobara grabs the severed hand, throws a straw doll on it and hammers a curse nail into it, immediately exorcising it. After getting rid of the curse, Yuji asks her why she joined Jujutsu Tech. She brashly claims to have joined because it's the only way to move to the city without worrying about the money. In a flashback, we learn that Sorei was a city girl who moved to her village when Nobara was very young. She was very kind-hearted and caring toward her, and they became close friends. However, the locals were envious and wary of her, which grew to paranoia that she looked down on them because she was from the city. They treated her horribly to the extent that she was eventually driven away. After that, Nobara knew she couldn't live in her hometown any longer. The next year, the first years are dispatched to deal with a potential special grade cursed worm that appeared above the detention center. For clarity's sake, curses are graded according to their power, ranging from the lowest grade 4 to special grade. Usually, a sorcerer on equal footing would have been sent for a womb that could metamorphose into a special grade curse, but Gojo is out of town on business, so the first years are on the job. They are escorted by Kiyotaka Aijichi, who warns them not to fight under any circumstances, their objective being solely to look for and help survivors since there are 5 inmates still inside with the womb. He creates a veil that conceals them from the public eye, and Megumi summons one of his dogs to help them detect when the curse is close by. They enter what is supposed to be a 2-story dorm, but instead see a tall and massive expanse filled with twisting pipes, and the door they enter from gone. Megumi realizes they're inside a huge innate domain created by the powerful curse. Soon, they find the mangled bodies of 3 inmates, one of them being the son of a distressed mother waiting for him to come out. Yuji wants to take the body with them to give the mother, but Megumi asserts that they must leave it behind for the best chance at survival. They get into an argument over it, but Nobara tells them to cut it out. Time and place, people, time and place. While yelling at them, she suddenly falls through the floor. Megumi gets alarmed, thinking his dog should have alerted them of the curse, but turns to see it dead and smeared against the wall. That's where I draw the line, leave the dog alone. Megumi tells Yuji they need to escape for now and can come back for Nobara, but trails off in the middle of his sentence when a chill runs down his spine. A special grade curse appears between them, and neither of them is able to move. Yuji gathers the will to reach for Slaughtered Demon, but the curse immediately chops his hand off. He tries to stop the bleeding by tightly winding a belt around his arm and tries to draw Sukuna out, saying if he dies, so will Sukuna. The demon corrects him, saying there are still 18 pieces of him out there, so he's not worried, but since he doesn't have control over his body, Yuji can do what he likes. However, if he lets Sukuna gain control, he'll kill both Megumi and Nobara before this other curse can. With no options left, Yuji tells Megumi to find and escape with Nobara, and after doing so, send him some kind of signal so that he can hand the baton to Sukuna. Megumi refuses at first, but ultimately obliges. He summons Nu, a flying Shikigami, to escape and unleashes his demon dogs to sniff her out. Meanwhile, Yuji tries his best to face the curse without having any idea how to use curse energy. Obviously, he gets tossed around like a plaything, and when he makes an attempt to withstand its bursts of energy, the fingers on his other hand start disintegrating, thoughts of fear and regret flood in. He's about to give up when he has a revelation. Curses manifest from the emotions of mankind, so he channels all the fear, hate, and regret he's feeling now into his fist to release curse energy. He charges toward the curse with his powered fist, but the curse simply blocks his punch with its hand. Thankfully, he hears the howls of Megumi's divine dogs and realizes he's signaling their safe return. He lets Sukuna take control, and the curse immediately detects the change in power and gets nervous. Instead of attacking the curse, Sukuna plots ways he can screw with Yuji, but knows he can't go straight to Megumi because he will just switch back. Instead, he thinks of drawing this curse out to kill Megumi. However, the curse doesn't follow him when he very politely asks and tries to attack him. He regenerates Yuji's hands, blocks the curse, and begins his gruesome attack on it. He ends up cutting the curse's limbs off and nailing them to the wall. The curse grows back its limbs to face him again, looking very pleased with itself, so Sukuna decides it's time to show it, and Yuji real Jujutsu. He uses a curse technique, domain expansion, to make his own domain called the Malevolent Shrine. The curse gets chopped up into pieces by the mere sight of it. Sukuna takes one of his fingers out of the curse's body and makes his leave before the curse completely disintegrates. He begrudgingly tells Yuji the job is done, and that if he plans on switching, he may as well do it now. Moments pass, and there's no response to Sukuna's delight. Megumi senses the special grade curse's innate domain closing, so all that's left is for Yuji to return safely. Another chill runs down his back, and he realizes Sukuna is behind him. Sukuna snarkily informs him that Yuji's having trouble switching back with him, but it's only a matter of time before he succeeds. So Sukuna takes him hostage by reaching into his chest and ripping his heart out since he doesn't need it to keep using this body, but Yuji will die if he switches back. As an extra measure, he swallows the finger he obtained from the curse. Next, he wishes to kill Megumi for shits and giggles. Megumi believes Yuji will be back as soon as he can, and that even though Sukuna doesn't need the heart to live, it must have significantly weakened him. He decides to try and make Sukuna think he needs to heal the heart to fight him so that Yuji can regain control of the body. He unleashes Nu on him and also fights him with his bare hands, but Sukuna dodges all his moves like he's play fighting with a kid. He summons Orochi, a giant serpent, to grab Sukuna, and the two Shikigami try to gang up on him, but he immediately destroys the snake and appears behind Megumi to throw him across the detention center. Nu flies to him and gives him a safe landing. Having lost his white divine dog in Orochi, he releases Nu before it also gets destroyed. Sukuna recognizes that Megumi uses shadows to create his Shikigami, unlike the typical charms technique. He finds it interesting and says it was a waste of his talent to run away from the special grade curse earlier. He asks him why he's risking his life for Yuji, who doesn't seem worth that much. Megumi thinks of a girl with kind eyes who once told him that if she had the time to curse people, she'd use that time to think of her loved ones instead. Despite her being a good person in all regards, she has met a tragic and unfair fate. Ever since that, Megumi decided to save good people and give them fairness in their lives, which is why he's fighting so hard for Yuji. He prepares to fight with newfound strength but stops when he notices Sukuna's marks fade. Megumi lets Yuji know that he never regretted saving his life, even though it was dangerous, because he knew he was a good person. Yuji, who's regained control of his body, thanks him and tells him and Nobara to live a long life while bleeding out profusely. Within seconds, he buckles to his knees and dies, all while giving a hearty smile. Once Gojo returns to the city, Kiyotaka recounts the events to him at the morgue. Gojo suspects the higher-ups used the special grade curse and his absence to their advantage and dispatched the first years for the mission they were clearly underqualified for in hopes of killing Yuji, since they didn't like the decision to suspend his death sentence indefinitely. The thought angers him so much that he considers killing all the higher-ups, which terrifies poor Kiyotaka. To his utmost relief, the school doctor named Shoko Airi walks into the room and dispels the tension. She takes off the sheet over Yuji's dead body, looking forward to dissecting and examining him. Meanwhile, Megumi and Nobara mourn the loss of their comrade at the school. They're approached by a second-year upperclassman, Maki Zinin, who chastises Megumi for calling him by her last name out of respect. She's the best student at wielding cursed tools. She's followed by two other second-years, a talking panda named Panda and a cursed speech user who only speaks in rice ball ingredients named Toj Inumaki. Panda apologizes for the unfortunate timing, but invites them to participate in the Kyoto Sister School Exchange event. Typically, it involves the second and third years, but the third years are suspended for some reason. It's an annual 2-day event in which select students meet up from both schools and participate in a competition proposed by the two principals. Megumi and Nobara agree to participate and receive training for it. While all this is happening, there's a whole load of stuff going down within Yuji's body. Sukuna sits on an extravagant throne atop a pile of carcasses and looks down on Yuji, who yells at him for killing him. He tries to land a blow on Sukuna, but of course fails, and Sukuna ends up sitting on him while explaining that they're in his innate domain. He wants to revive Yuji, claiming he has something he wants to see for himself now, thinking back to Megumi preparing for his second attack. He proposes setting up a pact where Sukuna revives them as long as Yuji lets him use his body for a minute after waking up and retains no memory of the pact after. Yuji rejects it because he doesn't trust him to use the body after seeing what he did last time. So Sukuna promises not to harm or kill anyone during that 1 minute, assuring him that once a pact is in place between jujutsu sorcerers, anyone who breaks it is punished. Yuji pretends to agree at first, but essentially says psych, and demands him to revive them without any conditions. They arrive at a compromise to fight each other to the death, and the winner decides the conditions. Immediately after agreeing on the fight, Sukuna slices Yuji's head in half. Meanwhile, nervous Kiyotaka somehow finds himself alone in a room with Gojo, who goes off on a monologue about why he got into teaching. It is clear to see how conservative and cowardly the ones at the top of the ladder are, so he believes a revolution in the jujutsu world is long overdue. He could kill all the higher-ups, but they would be replaced with the same type of people, and it would antagonize Gojo to the point he'd have no supporters. Instead, he chose to educate young and upcoming sorcerers so that they can bring about change when they're of age. Shoko calls out to them when she's prepared to start dissecting, but to everyone's surprise and Shoko's mild disappointment, Yuji gets up and greets them. Later, Gojo asks Shoko to leave Yuji listed as dead on the records to give him time to rebuild his strength before he's targeted again. He plans to have him make his comeback in time for the Kyoto Sister School Exchange event in 1.5 months. While Megumi and Nobara train him in the second years, Gojo tasks himself with secretly training Yuji. According to him, Yuji is better at close combat than the other first years, but he needs to learn basic jujutsu knowledge and how to control cursed energy. First, he demonstrates an important concept through 2 juice cans. He simultaneously pushes one of the cans with great force and twists the other, explaining that he used cursed energy on the first and a cursed technique on the other. That doesn't make any sense to Yuji, so Gojo compares cursed energy to electricity and cursed techniques to appliances. Controlling pure cursed energy is difficult and rough, just like with electricity, but it can be harnessed and channeled to perform tasks with appliances. Similarly, cursed techniques can be used by channeling cursed energy to make powerful and controlled effects. Yuji gets excited about learning cursed techniques, but Gojo deflates his enthusiasm by pointing out that sorcerers are born with their cursed techniques, except for using shikigami and making simple barriers. Instead, Yuji should focus on integrating cursed energy into his fighting style. He recalls that he'd already successfully done it once while facing the special grade curse in the detention center, so Gojo tells him to try it out again. He punches his hand, but there's no cursed energy behind it. Gojo explains that he probably created all that cursed energy because he was brimming with negative emotions in the detention center, but he is yet to train himself on how to create cursed energy at the tiniest spark of emotion and also how not to waste it when he's bursting with them. Yuji is going to train by watching an endless amount of movies ranging in emotions in the company of a cursed corpse doll, which gets activated to attack him whenever it stops receiving a steady flow of a set amount of cursed energy. The first goal is for him to watch an entire movie without awakening the doll, effectively training him to maintain a steady output of cursed energy, no matter what emotions he feels. Slowly, Gojo will increase the set amount of cursed energy the doll will need to stay calm. Before leaving, he asks Yuji if he talked to Sukuna while he was dead, specifically if he made any pact or contract with him. To which Yuji replies he thinks they did talk about something but can't remember what it was. After that, he leaves Yuji to work hard on his movie binging exercise. Kiyotaka drives Gojo to his appointment with the principal. On the way, he tells Kiyotaka to stop the car, gets off, and tells him to keep driving without him. Kiyotaka decides it's best not to ask questions and hurries away. Shortly after the car is out of sight, Gojo gets jumped by a one-eyed freak. The freak creates a mini volcano beside Gojo and blasts him with red-hot lava, scorching everything around him. The freak mutters that dealing with Gojo was easy, but the smoke slowly recedes to show Gojo is still standing there and absorbing the lava around him. He realizes the freak is a cursed spirit that is somehow able to communicate clearly and is probably stronger than Sukuna currently is. The spirit launches small flying creatures called ember insects on him, which he blocks right before they reach him. They set off an obnoxious sound before bursting into flames. Next, the spirit gets in close range to set him all up in flames by touching him and again mistakenly thinks he's defeated Gojo. Seeing him still alive astounds the spirit because he's sure he touched him this time, but Gojo corrects him, saying he touched the infinity that is between him and the spirit. As a live demonstration, he asks the spirit to touch his hand. The spirit extends his hand to touch him but is unable to completely close the gap between them. Gojo explains that his hand hasn't really been stopped, but it gets slower the closer it gets to his hand. Gojo bridges the gap for the spirit by intertwining his fingers with his and then sucker punches him. After that, it's a one-sided fight where Gojo wipes the floor with the spirit. While the spirit recovers from one of the hits, Gojo disappears from the scene to check on Yuji, who he finds completely engrossed in the film but not setting off the cursed corpse doll. Even when he talks to Gojo, the cursed doll isn't set off, proving he's learned to control his cursed energy at an extraordinary pace. Impressed, Gojo takes Yuji back to where the spirit is to let him spectate the pinnacle of jujutsu techniques, Domain Expansion. The cursed spirit recognizes Yuji as Sukuma's vessel and wonders what Gojo's play is. It seems the spirit is here to act on some grand agenda that involves rendering Gojo incapable of fighting and getting Yuji and Sukuna to join whatever his cause is. This makes him suspect Gojo has already caught on to their plans and brought Yuji, because he knows the spirit can't kill him. However, Gojo denies bringing him as a shield and claims he only brought him here for an extracurricular lesson, even going on to suggest there's no danger because the spirit is weak. This enrages the spirit, causing him to blow his top literally. He uses Domain Expansion to drag them into his domain called Coffin of the Iron Mountain. As any good teacher would, Gojo starts explaining to Yuji that domains are landscapes imbued with cursed techniques created by a huge consumption of cursed energy. Although it comes with a great cost of cursed energy, laying your domain comes with many benefits. The sorcerer gets an automatic buff in stats due to the domain's environmental factors, and all curse techniques imbued inside the domain are guaranteed to hit its target. However, there are ways to deal with it. The first is blocking it with your own curse technique. The second is escaping the domain, which is usually impossible. Finally, the last method is to lay your own domain, because when two domains are laid, the more refined one dominates. This is when Gojo takes off his blindfold to reveal his vibrant blue eyes and uses domain technique to open his infinity void domain. He greets his cursed spirit guest to the inner world of Limitless, an endless expanse that subjugates its victims to the crippling sensation of infinities. The spirit can do nothing and is essentially frozen in place. Gojo says he'll spare the spirit because he has questions to ask him and rips his head off. His domain shatters after that, and he steps on the still alive but stunned head to ask who sent the cursed spirit after him. The spirit refuses to answer. While interrogating him, a huge plant shoots out of the ground. A bed of flowers spreads around it. Both Gojo and Yuji are captivated by the beauty of flowers and get distracted. However, Gojo snaps out of it quickly, realizing it's a cursed technique that lowers their will to fight. However, it's too late because another cursed spirit grabs Mr. Volcano head and slips away. Gojo brushes it off as a non-issue for the time being and tells Yuji he wants him and his classmates to get strong enough to fight such powerful cursed spirits. They'll be increasing the pace of his lessons by making him watch more movies and fight with Gojo for the next month. After that, he'll take on harder missions to learn from practical combat so that he can show off his new tricks at the exchange event. It's exciting stuff. It's the day of the Kyoto principal and students' arrival. The second years discuss amongst themselves how they're nervous about the possibility that they're endangering the first years because the Kyoto principal is one of the higher-ups involved in the decision to make the first years deal with the detention center crisis. However, Maki thinks Yuji was the real target, so now that he's dead, there's nothing to worry about the other two. In fact, they should be more worried about the students who seem to have a passion for harassing the Tokyo students. Speaking of the devil, two Kyoto students, a brute named Oi Todo and Maki's twin sister named Mei Zinin, approach Megumi and Nobara. Right off the bat, Mei screws with them by suggesting they don't care and are, in fact, happy that their classmate Yuji died since he was basically a half-monster brazenly masquerading as a jujutsu sorcerer. Oi tells her to shut up about all this because all that he's interested in knowing is if these first years are fit to be stand-ins for Akatsu, another second year who we haven't seen because he's away for some work. In a confrontation that almost plays out as a comedy routine, Todo picks a fight with Megumi because of his boring preference in women, while Mei stops Nobara from interfering. Knowing Todo as the close combat specialist who exorcised 5 first-grade curses and 1 special-grade curse during last year's Jujutsu terror attack orchestrated by the curse user, Gitu, Megumi tries and keeps some distance while fighting him. However, he gets absolutely owned by Todo until he decides to go all out. However, before he can kick it up a notch, Toad uses his cursed speech to make Todo stop in his tracks, and Panda forces him out of fighting range. Sensing Megumi was about to show his real capabilities, Todo says he looks forward to the exchange event and backs off. Meanwhile, Nobara and Mei also bat into a fight, which ends with Nobara defeated and lying on the floor while Mei points a gun at her. Maki walks in to defend Nobara, and the sisters get into a squabble from which we learn that Mei barely has any curse techniques and can only imbue objects with curse energy while Maki doesn't have any curse energy at all. While they're arguing, Nobara gets up and traps Mei's limbs in a hold. Thankfully, the situation doesn't escalate any further because Todo tells Mei they have to leave if they want to make it in time for a sightseeing activity. While Nobara and Maki walk together, Nobara asks Maki if it's true that she has no cursed energy. Maki admits it and explains that she needs those glasses to see curses and exclusively uses weapons already imbued with cursed energy to fight. She's training to be a jujutsu sorcerer out of spite for her family, who spent years looking down on her. Meanwhile, Gojo meets with Principal Gakuganji, who was expecting to meet with Principal Masamichi instead to address his involvement in the plan to kill Yuji. He brings up the 2 special-grade curses that attacked him the other day, last year's Jujutsu terror attack by Geru Subaru, the unbelievable power of some of the students like Akatsu, and the appearance of Sukuna's vessel to highlight how the conservative attitude and wall of traditional statutes the higher-ups have built to hold back power is going to backfire, and Gojo won't be the only one who's going to fight against them soon. Elsewhere in Tokyo, a timid and unpopular student named Junpei Yoshino is horrendously bullied by a group of delinquents who falsely accuse him of inappropriately staring at a female student. In the name of justice, they beat him up till his uniform is tattered and bloody while laughing at his misery. One day, he skips school to watch a movie at the theater, but unfortunately for him, the same bullies are sitting on the seats in front of him. They talk loudly and crassly throughout the film as if they own the place. Suddenly, a person with long gray hair appears behind them and tells them to mind their manners before killing them and leaving behind their disturbingly disfigured bodies. Junpei goes after the person to confront them and asks if there's any way he could also do the same thing to people. Jujutsu sorcerers get access to the crime scene before the cops. Yuji is sent with a supervisor, a grade 1 sorcerer, Kento Nanami, to investigate the scene. Kento is a stoic, strictly by the book, and hard-to-read teacher compared to Gojo and gives Yuji a tough time while teaching him about curse residuals, which are faint traces of curse energy left after a curse technique is used. After looking hard, Yuji notices a trail left behind by the curse user, which they follow to track down the party responsible. They suspect a cursed spirit is behind the incident because there was no one visible in the movie theater in the CCTV footage, except for another ordinary high school student. They're eventually confronted by 2 curses, and Nanami delegates 1 curse to each of them. While fighting his curse, he monotonously explains that his curse technique lets him forcibly create a weak point on his enemies' bodies at the ratio point of 7:3 on an invisible line that goes across the length of their bodies, allowing him to deal severe blows even on stronger opponents. He demonstrates the technique by chopping off his curse's limbs by hitting the weak points in one swoop. Yuji notices that he was able to defeat it without even unwrapping his blade and using the back end of it. Yuji faces his own curse and uses a move he developed with Gojo's help during training called Divergent Fist. Gojo noticed there's a time lag between his strikes and cursed energy, allowing him to turn 1 strike into 2 impacts. He blows a hole into the curse's body using his Divergent Fist. Nanami gets distracted while watching him fight and realizes he still needs to exercise his curse. However, he notices a watch on one of the curse's hands and tells Yuji not to exercise his opponent because he suspects that they were fighting humans all along. An investigation by Shoko confirms his suspicion. She informs him that the victims' bodies were structurally modified by some curse technique, just like the one used on the dead victims in the movie theater. She notes that the technique seems to have modified the nature of their brain stem, which may have served to cause confusion within them and enable them to use cursed energy. In the end, she tries to comfort Yuji by saying they died out of shock caused by the heavy modification of their bodies, so he didn't kill them. After the call, Nanami and Yuji realize they're facing a tough foe and gear up to go all out. Meanwhile, the mystery gray-haired person introduces himself as Mahito and takes Junpei underground to answer his questions. He explains that there are special cursed spirits called special grade potential apparitions, which form from the collective fears of people, such as Bloody Mary and the nine-tailed fox. This is not only restricted to the collective fear of fairy-tale ghosts, but also extends to the destructive force of nature, which has led to the formation of powerful and wise cursed spirits beyond one's imagination. Mahito explains that he also is such a curse born out of people's hatred and fear toward others. The next day, Nanami reports that he's close to tracking down their target's hideout. Meanwhile, Yuji and Kiyotaka need to investigate the other student at the scene, Junpei, because he's suspected of being an evil jujutsu sorcerer behind the incident. After Yuji leaves, Kiyotaka asks Nanami if he's already found the hideout, to which he says, of course, but he'd rather not involve Yuji, who is still so young in such a dangerous operation. Junpei and Mahito continue to talk to each other about how they hate humans. Mahito shows him one of his experiments, a large amorphous purple blob with eyes, and explains he wants to know just how large he can make a human. He hands another one of his subjects to Junpei. He tested how small he could make humans with this one. He is struck by Junpei's calm and apathetic demeanor upon seeing them. Junpei explains he knows more than anybody how humans can be, so he's indifferent when he sees unknown dead or suffering people. Seeing all the hatred inside him, Mahito enables and fuels it by telling him to do whatever he wants to people because he will completely sanction him. Yuji and Kiyotaka find Junpei outside his house wearing casual clothes, meaning he's been skipping school for a while. Yuji follows him down the street to wait until they reach an empty place and set off a fly head, a low-level curse not even worth a level 4 grade, to test if he has jujutsu powers. If he does, he should immediately be restrained with force for questioning about the incident. Meanwhile, Nanami infiltrates Mahito's underground hideout. Mahito is relieved he's in Gojo Satoru, while Nanami hopes to finish this quickly because he doesn't want to work overtime. He notes the similarities between Mahito and Gojo, specifically their shallow and frivolous nature, which masks their sinister and powerful strength. He cuts through one of Mahito's arms using his ratio technique. However, Mahito quickly regrows it, explaining that he has the cursed technique Idle Transfiguration to alter the shape of one's soul. The body is a mere projection of the soul, and its form depends on the shape of the soul. So he isn't healing, he's simply strongly maintaining the shape of his soul. He shows Nanami some of his human specimens he's subjected to a variety of soul transfigurations, saying normal humans are difficult to work with because they usually die in the process. He wonders if it's the same for jujutsu sorcerers, implying he wants to make Nanami one of his guinea pigs. Unbothered, Nanami checks the time on his watch and realizes it's already 5:30 p.m., and his workday is scheduled to end by 6, so he needs to clean up before that at all costs to avoid overtime. Junpei reaches his house to find one of his teachers sitting outside the front gate. Apparently, waiting for his arrival, the teacher shames him for not attending the funerals of his 3 bullies, calling them his friends. The suggestion triggers him so much that his mind spirals through all the torture those alleged friends inflicted upon him, and he fills with rage and hatred for the teacher. Remembering Mahito's promise, he is about to curse the teacher when Yuji suddenly jumps from around the corner to grab the head fly that was accidentally freed by Kiyotaka despite there being another person around Junpei. While catching the curse, Yuji notices Junpei looking at it, indicating he can see it. After tricking the teacher into leaving them alone, he asks Junpei to come with him because he has a few questions for him. The fight underground continues as Nanami dodges the human specimen Mahito uses to attack him by increasing and altering its shape. At one point, he ends up on top of the specimen's head, which weakly moans out for help and starts crying. He recalls Shoko telling him that once a human is transfigured, they can't be returned to normal, so the best option is to end their suffering by killing them. He wipes the tear off its face and shakes off Mahito's jeering by stating he doesn't let his personal feelings interfere with his work. However, Mahito sees through the straight face and can feel his soul trembling. He uses this moment of vulnerability to seize his soul and pull back before he can fight back by changing his bottom half into deer legs for increased speed. Luckily, Nanami's soul is protected by some cursed energy, but if Mahito touches him a few more times, his soul will be under his control. The clock strikes 6 p.m., officially forcing Nanami into overtime. This activates a time-based pact, releasing his full cursed energy that was deliberately suppressed before. He uses his ratio technique on the wall to cause it to collapse, forcing Mahito to focus on dodging the fallen debris when Nanami suddenly appears in front of him and cuts one of his legs off. After that, he announces that it's his time to retreat and that they can continue this if they both survive to meet again. Meanwhile, Yuji has Junpei and Tao, but is not able to reach Kiyotaka's cell because he's busy catching the other loose curse. Junpei observes him carefully, noticing the spiral pattern on his button, and remembers Mahito telling him to be friendly to those who wear them because they're jujutsu sorcerers. Yuji gets impatient and decides to interrogate him himself. He asks him if he saw anything weird in the theater before the murders, but he denies seeing anything and claims that he only began to see curses after the incident. Yuji's satisfied with his answer and asks him if they can wait for his boss for further questions. Believing in his innocence, he starts up a conversation with Junpei to get to know him. They get along over discussing movies because Junpei is something of a film buff and Yuji was forced to watch a lot of them during his training. While passionately sharing his analysis of a horror film, Junpei's mom comes over to see her son with Yuji and asks if he's a friend, to which Yuji enthusiastically answers that even though he's just met him, he hopes they can be. He stays over for dinner and starts telling funny tales about his childhood and school days, which Junpei's mom finds hysterically funny and can't seem to control her laughter, or maybe that's just because she had way too much to drink. This woman literally hands Yuji a plate and asks him to do something funny with it, and somehow, this absolute mad lad ends up performing a scene from a movie, which Junpei gets excited about. They talk about it for a bit before they decide to watch the movie together, after which Yuji leaves his place to go back. Disaster strikes that night, however, and the next day, Nanami informs Yuji that Junpei's mother is dead. He is utterly confused as to how this could happen because she was perfectly fine yesterday. Nanami tells him that someone left one of Sukuma's unsealed fingers on the table that she was sleeping on, which resulted in a bunch of cursed spirits getting attracted to it. One of them ended up killing her, but surprisingly, when the jujutsu sorcerers arrived at the scene, the room was clean, and Junpei's mom, or whatever was left of her, was laid down on her bed, covered with a blanket. Yuji asks Nanami how Junpei was feeling, but he replies that Junpei was missing, and that is very troubling news, and he tells Yuji to find Junpei and make sure he doesn't do anything rash. Junpei, however, is too far gone now. When he found his mother dead in the kitchen, his heart was broken. Mahito, who was responsible for putting the finger there to orchestrate this incident, arrived at his house and ended up consoling him and manipulating him into gaining cursed powers and taking revenge on the people who had wronged him. The next morning, Junpei was a different person. He lost all of his feelings and was an empty husk of the person he once used to be. He slowly walked over to his school, which was shrouded by the mysterious dark dome, and entered the auditorium, where the seniors were getting awarded for their achievements. Every other student inside the room was knocked out, except for the senior who bullied him and the teacher who watched him get bullied but never said a word to defend him. He walks past the unconscious students and the teacher, while the teacher tries to stop him. But Junpei is sick of being the beta male all his life and has ascended to the level of a Chad. He walks towards his senior and asks him whether he was the one who left the finger at his place, but the senior obviously has no idea what he is talking about. Junpei, however, has decided that he is done with this world and all the crappy people in it and is ready to unlive this fool. He pricks the senior with his cursed skill, and immediately his hands start getting poisoned. His entire body becomes weak and blue spots cover his face, while Junpei walks towards him and punches him straight in the face. The senior falls down on the ground while Junpei proceeds to kick the living daylights out of him, telling him that he is going to die regardless of whether he had a hand in her mother's murder or not, as he has already given him enough pain for several lifetimes. He uses his powers to lift up the senior, strangling him, but suddenly the gates open and Yuji arrives inside the auditorium, telling Junpei to stop, but he immediately realizes that he is not the friend that he knew and is transformed into something much more evil.